Frank Klose, our next guest. He's our Phillies Insider for 97.3 ESPN. Frank, welcome.
Hey, what's up, Pete?
Not bad, buddy. How are you? And just before we get you all hooked up and ready to go, the news comes down that the Phillies have signed Odubel Herrera to a 5-year contract through the 2021 season. So how about you walk us through some of those details, as Odubel Herrera is going to be a Philly for quite a while longer.
Yeah, I had to quickly post something to 973ESPN.com before the call came in, so I did get some details up really fast. We don't know the financial terms of the deal yet, but it looks like this is a 5-year deal, and there are also 2 club option years beyond that the Phillies could exercise. So this deal is one that really is good for the Phillies, provided that Odubel Herrera produces. You mentioned just a second ago that this could mean that Herrera is here for a long time. I'm also kind of wondering if it could mean that he's not here for a long time, because we just saw a blockbuster trade just last week where the Washington Nationals traded perhaps the 2 best pitching prospects in the game for outfielder Adam Eaton, who you could argue is very similar to Herrera and a lot of what the numbers he's put up the last couple of years. And there was a really high value placed on Eaton's contract and it being affordable and being for 5 years. So I think that this doesn't guarantee Herrera is here the whole time. It certainly helps the Phillies out in that if they find themselves with some of their prospects that they need to come up and they need to play center field, Herrera is very, very tradable now. Even if he's doing a so-so job, but I think he'll continue to give the Phillies what he did, and thus teams might really want to trade for him if the Phillies find themselves with a logjam in the outfield.
A good take on that, Frank. Herrera, 24 years old, batted .286 this past season, 21 doubles, 6 triples, 15 home runs, 87 runs scored, 25 stolen bases. Of course, he was the Phillies' all-star this past season. When I think of Odubel Herrera, I think of him at Wrigley Field turning the wrong way on the ball and then finally catching the final out of Cole Hamels and the no-hitter at Wrigley. And so that takes me back to the fact that he was a Rule 5 pickup from the Texas Rangers, and he's not really what you would call a pure outfielder. So I guess the upside for the Phillies is more his bat than his fielding ability, right?
Well, I think he's come a long way since he took to the outfield. When the Phillies put him in the outfield, he had very little experience. And kind of for the Texas Rangers, I think why they left him unprotected was that this was a guy that was supposed to be a shortstop, and he was so-so. And then they put him at some second base in the Rangers system, and he didn't light the world on fire there either. And you might remember even in spring training of 2015 when the Phillies claimed him, Herrera played a little bit of second base for them as well as they tried to figure out where he would fit in the club. So I think what we saw in that no-hitter from Cole Hamels, the little uncertainty, I think he's cleaned a lot of that up in the last year, and hopefully he'll continue to get better, which someone like Herrera, he really needs to be in center field to really get the full value from his bat. You know, he's not going to hit a lot of home runs as you might expect of a corner outfielder. So I think they still think there's room for him to grow in the outfield, and I think he really has come a long way from his first season.
Now, of course, it's December 15th, not April 15th, but if the Phillies season was starting today or tomorrow, how do you look at that outfield left to right?
Well, right now with the players they have, Howie Kendrick will be in left field. Kendrick played a little bit of left field last year. They sort of used him as the super utility player for the Dodgers last year, and Kendrick unfortunately had one of his worst seasons last year. So the Phillies kind of got him on the cheap, relatively speaking, hoping that he can get a lot of his bat back. But Kendrick will be in left field, and the hope is by knowing where he's going every day and playing every day, he'll do just fine in left field and possibly be a trade candidate eventually. But he'll be in left. Herrera will be in center. Right field is still kind of under consideration still. Aaron Altair, he came back from that really rough wrist injury, and as we saw with a lot of other players who had similar injuries, it really takes a long time to really get you back on track. And so the Phillies let Altair play down the stretch, and I think he needs to continue to heal and continue to work on that wrist, but he very well could make the team as the right fielder. And Roman Quinn has a shot to start the season in the Phillies outfield as well. So what I think they'll do is, as of right now, provided they don't add anybody else, they'll go into spring training with the two of them sort of battling out for that last position, and hopefully one of them really steps up and grabs it.
Frank, I was looking at this is Scott Grayson, by the way. I was looking at the Baseball America's top 10 prospects list that the Phillies have. And, of course, they've been really building their farm system through these trades over the last few years. When you look at the number 1 prospect that they have ranked there, J.P. Crawford. Number 2 is Mickey Moniak. Number 3, catcher Jorge Alfaro. Do you see either or any or all 3 of those 3 players potentially playing in Philadelphia at the big league level at some point in 2017?
Well, I think Alfaro has a shot to even make the team out of spring training. The catcher position kind of isn't settled yet for the Phillies. A.J. Ellis, they really liked him as a backup, but he signed with the Miami Marlins. Cameron Rupp did a nice job as a starter, so he's the incumbent until he's not there anymore. I guess the question would be, do they really want to bring up one of their young catchers, such as Knapp or Alfaro, while Cameron Rupp is still there? They may want to wait a while, or maybe perhaps, if you notice on that prospect list, Andrew Knapp had fallen off the prospect list. He went from being number 4 to not being included. I think he does remain a prospect. I think of the 2 players, if there's going to be a backup catcher from one of the 2, it would be Knapp over Alfaro. But I think the Phillies are still listening and seeing what's out there. And if they happen to trade Cameron Rupp, I think Alfaro would get the job. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see him at some point. At the very least, we'll see him in September. But I think the Phillies, when they bring Alfaro up, they want to really let him have the job. And so I think he is a good bet to be in Philadelphia somehow, some way. But they won't do it if he won't play. Now, the other 2, Crawford, I think he has to show that he's a hitter in the major leagues. I think they, last year at AAA, they kind of promoted him even though he was having a so-so year at AA. And I think he's really got to step up and just tear the cover off the ball for the Phillies to feel like they have to move him up through the system. And one thing about Crawford is he does not have to be on the 40-man roster next year if the Phillies don't call him up. So once you call him up, then you're bumping somebody else off. So if the Phillies are trying to keep as many of the prospects as possible, they're not going to add Crawford prematurely unless there's a good reason to. And Moniak, I think he's still four seasons away at the minimum, and so he'll get his first real look probably at Clearwater, maybe even Lakewood. I think even though he was a top prospect, he's on the younger side, so he played in the rookie league, and we'll get some time at Lakewood, and hopefully, if all goes well, he might get to see Clearwater. But he's still a few years away.
How about, Frank, as you look at the Phillies, and for Philly fans out there, they've signed a relief pitcher in Benoit. Do you get the sense that this is not the year that they're going to go out and spend some money, that they're kind of reserving their cash for potentially next year?
Yeah, Matt Klentak did say at the winter meetings that the club is going to spend. It's just they're going to spend at the right time. So I think they're at a point right now where, one, there really aren't any really attractive free agents out there that really make sense to break the bank on. That has a lot to do with it. And two, they're still in a process in which they're evaluating what exactly they have and what exactly they don't have. So I think in another year, and maybe even 2 to a certain extent, the Phillies will get a better handle on which of their young players are going to be an important part in the major leagues. And they'll get a good sense at the same time where they have holes. And where they have holes, they can go in and spend a lot of money. So I think that's it's a situation where the young talent has to sort of rise to the top, and the Phillies take a step back and say, okay, we've got this young talent. What do we need to do to fill in the gaps and make the team a contender? And then they'll go and fill in those gaps. And really, because they really have so much money right now, which is amazing. It's, a lot of people were upset that they spent $17 million on Jeremy Hellickson, but the reality is that $17 million isn't going to keep them from doing anything else. It's just, he fills a really important need for one season, and so they'll pay whatever it takes just to make sure they have it. So I think right now with those relievers you mentioned, and with the likes of Hellickson coming back, they're trying to make this as functional a team as possible, so that the young players really get to experience that. and then they'll go for the major upgrades once they know who's part of the long-term future.
We're talking with Frank Klose. He's our 97.3 Phillies insider, also Philadelphia. You can find him on Twitter at Frank Klose and find out the latest on the Phillies. Now, Frank, I'll wrap up by asking you about Andres Blanco. If I'm not mistaken, Andres Blanco was the guy with that gruesome finger injury in Pittsburgh where he actually broke his left index finger, kind of got cleated there, and the Phillies infield really suffered. What value does Andres Blanco bring the Phillies both on the field and off the field?
Yeah, that was one gruesome injury. That really skewed me out personally. But, yeah, Blanco is the type of player that's so wonderful to have on a major league roster because you can put him at shortstop, you can put him at second base. You know, having one player that can fill in for both your middle infielders is tremendous to have. And as we saw, he's played third base, he's played first base, and he's even played the outfield. So, and for a team like the Phillies right now, he's their best left-handed pinch hitting bat as well. So he's filling so many different roles for a team like that. And I was kind of concerned that they would let him go, and replacing him was going to be very, very difficult. And one thing I can tell you too is if you walk into the Phillies clubhouse, you usually see around Blanco the likes of Freddie Galvis and Cesar Hernandez and Maikel Franco, and while his leadership to the whole club is valuable, I think he's particularly mentored those three, and they're going to continue to develop thanks to his tutelage. So I think having Blanco back is a really smart idea for the Phillies, and he'll be the senior voice in the clubhouse, let's face it, with the likes of Carlos Ruiz and Ryan Howard gone. So he's filling a really important role for the Phillies this year, and I'm sure they're very happy that they have him back.
He's Frank Klose. He's our Phillies insider on 97.3 ESPN. And just today, Phillies announcing that they've signed center fielder Odubel Herrera to a 5-year contract. Frank always in touch with the show if things break with Phillies news. And, of course, we're always happy to have him on the air to give us the latest and the updates from all things Phillies related. Frank, thanks so much. We really appreciate catching up with you.
Thanks, Pete and Scott. Have a good one.